My parents' answer to everything was be patient. I was patient for 15 years. Then I understood that patience without action is just waiting, and waiting had been costing me things I couldn't get back. Posted to r/true off my chest. The word patient did a lot of work in my family. It was the answer to questions about fairness. It was the answer to questions about recognition. It was the answer to questions about change, about when things would be different, about why they were the way they were. Be patient. Things take time. Good things come to those who wait. The vocabulary of patience was rich and varied, and always available, ready to be applied to whatever situation I brought to my parents as a question or a grievance or just a confusion I needed help with. I was patient. I was very good at it. I was good at it the way a person gets good at anything they have practiced consistently from an early age, the habit so deep it became reflex, the reflex so familiar it became character. I was the patient one. I waited. I trusted the process. I believed that if I did my part, if I was good and consistent and didn't make noise, the things I was owed would arrive in their own time. They did not arrive. Some of them arrived late. Some arrived in worse condition than they would have if I'd moved sooner. Some did not arrive at all because the window closed while I was waiting for the right moment to step through it. I am 35 years old, and I want to tell you about the 15 years it took me to understand that patience was never the answer my parents thought it was. It was the answer that worked for them, the answer that kept the peace, kept the family running, kept uncomfortable conversations from having to happen. Patience in my family was not a virtue. It was a deferral mechanism. And the person who deferred was always me. My name is Kofi. My parents are Abina and Francis, and they're the kindest people I know, and I want to say that clearly before I say anything else. What I am describing is not malice. It is not even carelessness exactly. It is the specific, well-intentioned mistake of parents who had learned patience as a survival strategy in their own lives and passed it on as wisdom without examining what it cost the person receiving it. My parents immigrated. They built something in a country that did not always welcome them, through a combination of work and discipline and the patient endurance of things that were unfair because the alternative, confronting the unfairness directly, carried risks they could not afford. Patience for them was not passive. It was strategic. It was how you moved forward when moving forward loudly was too dangerous. I understand this now. I did not understand it when I was 20 and being told to be patient about a situation at work that required a direct conversation, not more waiting. I did not understand it at 24 when I was told to be patient about a relationship that had been wrong for 2 years and that patience was not going to fix. I did not understand it at 28 when I was told to be patient about asking for a promotion I had already earned and had been not asking for because someone had told me to wait. The right moment would come. The right moment does not come. The right moment is made. Let me give you the texture of the patience instruction across 3 situations, because texture is what makes a pattern visible rather than theoretical. The first was work. I was 22, 18 months into a job I had taken out of university. I was doing well, I knew it, my manager knew it, the reviews said it. A colleague who had joined after me was given a project I had been building toward. When I mentioned this to my parents, my father said, "Be patient. They will see you. Do your work. Don't make noise. The recognition will come." I waited. I did my work. I didn't make noise. I waited for another 8 months, at which point the colleague was promoted to a role that I had been informally told was mine in the making. I left the company within the year. In the exit interview, I said the promotion timeline had been unclear. The interviewer said, "Did you ever directly ask where you stood?" I had not. It had not occurred to me to ask directly because the answer to the question of how to get what I needed had always been to wait, not to ask. The second was a relationship. I was 25. I had been with someone for 2 years. Not a bad relationship, not cruel, but fundamentally misaligned in ways that had been visible from early on and that I had been patient about, waiting for them to resolve through the natural passage of time and accumulated shared experience. When I raised with my mother that I was not sure the relationship was right, she said, "Be patient. Relationships take work. You're still learning each other." I waited. I worked. I was patient for another 1.5 years before we ended it, by which point both of us had invested 3.5 years in something that had been clearly insufficient from the end of year 1. My mother, When it ended, said she was sorry it hadn't worked out. I did not say what I was thinking, which was, if I had moved 18 months earlier, we would both have had 18 months back. The third was the promotion I did not ask for. 28. I had been at a company for 3 years and had, by any honest accounting, been performing at a level above my title for over a year. My manager liked me. The work was good. But every time I thought about having the direct conversation, asking plainly where I was in the pipeline, making the case for the promotion, naming what I wanted, I heard my father's voice and I waited for the right moment. The right moment did not come. A restructuring came instead, my manager left, and the relationship I had been carefully building with the person who could have advocated for me dissolved with her departure. I started over with a new manager. I had waited past the window. I want to tell you what changed, because the change did not come from a single dramatic moment. It came from a question. I was 30, in a therapist's office for the first time, and Dr. Kwame Asani asked me to describe a situation I had been patient about. I described the promotion, the waiting, the restructuring, the window closing. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. At the end he said, "What were you waiting for, specifically?" I said, "The right moment." He said, "How would you have known when it arrived?" I opened my mouth and closed it. I said, "I don't know." He said, "Had you defined what the right moment looked like?" I said, "No." He said, "So you were waiting for something you hadn't defined and had no way to recognize?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What were you actually waiting for underneath the right moment?" I sat with that question for the rest of the session and for a long time after it. What was I waiting for? I had been telling myself I was waiting for the right moment, for the natural progression of events, for the recognition to come. But those were all the same thing dressed differently. Underneath them was something simpler and more uncomfortable. I was waiting to be given what I needed without having to ask for it. Because asking felt like demanding. Because demanding felt like making noise. Because making noise felt like the thing my parents had learned not to do and had passed on to me as the safe way to move through the world, and I had internalized it so completely that I had lost the ability to distinguish between situations where patience was strategic and situations where patience was just fear of the conversation. I had a conversation with my parents that summer. Not a confrontation, a real conversation, the kind I had been circling for years and had been patient about having. I told them what I have told you. The 3 situations, the pattern, the question Dr. Asani had asked. I told them that I had understood where the patient's instruction came from, that I knew it had worked for them in the specific context of their lives and their immigration and the risks they had navigated, and that I also needed them to understand that it had not transferred cleanly to my context. My mother said, "We just didn't want you to push too hard and damage things." I said, "I understand that. But there's a difference between pushing too hard and asking at all." I was waiting for things without asking for them, which meant the people who could give me things had no idea I wanted them. My father said, "You didn't ask?" I said, "No." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because you told me to be patient." He was quiet for a moment. I watched him receive that, the specific weight of a parent understanding that their advice has produced a consequence they did not intend. He said, "We meant don't be aggressive. Don't push in a way that closes doors." I said, "I know. What I heard was don't ask. Don't make noise. Wait." My mother said, "That's not what we meant." I said, "I know, but that's what it produced." It was not an argument. It was a calibration. 2 parents and a son adjusting the shared understanding of something that had operated unexamined for 30 years. My father asked me what I wished he had said instead. I told him. He wrote it down. Literally, on a piece of paper he had nearby. I will not tell you what I said because it felt private, but I will tell you that a man who raised me on patience writing down a different instruction felt, in the moment, like being given a key to a room that had always been locked. What changed after I stopped waiting? I asked for the next promotion directly. I had a prepared case, a specific conversation, a clear statement of what I wanted and why I had earned it. It was the most uncomfortable professional conversation I had had to that point. It was also the most effective. I was promoted 6 weeks later. I ended a friendship that had been draining me for years and that I had been patient with, because ending it felt aggressive and I had been waiting for it to naturally resolve. I ended it with honesty and care and the clear statement that the dynamic had become something I couldn't sustain. The friendship ended. I do not miss it the way I thought I would. I asked a person I had been interested in for 8 months and had been patient about, waiting for the right signal, the right moment, whether they wanted to go out. They said yes. We have been together for 2 years. I want to be careful about how I tell this part because I do not want it to read as, I stopped being patient and everything immediately worked out. That is not what happened. Some things I asked for directly and did not get. One direct conversation closed a door I had hoped to open. The promoted friendship that ended was mourned genuinely before it stopped being missed. Direct action is not a guarantee. It is just the only mechanism that has a chance. What patience guaranteed was nothing. Patience guaranteed the situation would continue exactly as it was until something external changed it, and external changes are indifferent to your interests. Patience was a bet on luck. Direct action was at least a bet on yourself. I called my father last year when I was about to have a difficult conversation at work, the kind I would have deferred for months in my previous life. I called him not for permission, but to tell him what I was about to do. I told him I was going into a conversation that might be uncomfortable and that I was going in directly, without waiting for the right moment, because I had learned that the right moment was the moment when you were ready, and I was ready. He said, "Good." One word. The word had behind it 30 years of a different instruction, and I could hear him revising something. I could hear the revision in the single syllable. He said, "Let me know how it goes." I called him afterward. It went well. He said he was glad. I said, "Thanks for teaching me to be patient, Dad. It kept me from doing a lot of things badly. I just needed to learn that it wasn't the answer to everything." He said, "I think we were too one-note about it." I said, "You were passing on what worked for you." He said, "It was a different time, different costs." I said, "I know." He said, "You figured out the difference." I said, "Eventually." He said, "That's what matters." The word patience is not ruined for me. I still use it. There are situations that genuinely require waiting, healing, growing, the natural pace of things that cannot be forced. Patience for those things is real and necessary, and I practice it. What I no longer practice is patience as a substitute for speaking. Patience as the answer to situations that require a direct conversation, a clear ask, a named need. Patience in place of the discomfort of saying the thing. I say the thing now, not always well, not always at the right moment or with the right words, but I say it. I say it because 15 years of not saying it taught me exactly what not saying it costs, and the cost is specific and real and does not stop accumulating just because you have decided to be patient. The things I was owed did not arrive while I was waiting. Some of them arrived when I went and got them. The rest I have made my peace with, not patiently, honestly. Edit. My mother called me last month to tell me she had asked directly for something she had been waiting on for 2 years, a family matter I will not detail here. She said she had been thinking about our conversation from the summer, about what patience had cost. She said asking had been uncomfortable. She said it had worked. She said, "You were right." I said, "You taught me to wait. I taught myself to ask. We both know something now." She laughed. It was the best kind of laugh, the kind that means something old has been let go of. I have been carrying that laugh with me for weeks. Edit 2. I asked Dr. Asani, at our last session, what he had seen in me at 30 that made him ask the question about the right moment. He said, "You described your life in the passive voice. Things happened to you. Things didn't work out. Moments didn't come. I wanted to know where you were in your own story." I said, "Where am I now?" He said, "Present tense, active voice." I wrote that down. Present tense, active voice. That is the whole distance between waiting and living, and it is shorter than I thought, and I am glad I finally crossed it.